So this is Diana Dombrowski with the Sam Proctor Oral History Program on April 16th, 2014 with Alex Theodore. We're going to be talking about the IPPD program in honor of its 20th anniversary. So I wonder if you could start off by please telling us a little about your educational background and what brought you to the program.
Well, I did my bachelor's of engineering, chemical engineering, and started in 2003, and I graduated sometime after that. I believe it was 2008, the very end of it. So that was a fairly long career in school. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would go back and do it again. I would go back and do several different degrees if I could. And I'm very happy to have done what I did.
Great. Okay. So what brought you to IPPD specifically? What attracted you immediately? How did you hear about it?
The reality is that most students, people in general, but students especially, don't really know what they're doing. They either get lucky and fall into it or have someone who kind of helps them steer them in that direction. And I don't really remember what combination of those circumstances got me into IPPD, but I remember it being a little bit more practical application, and I remember it fitting into my schedule a little better. Mm-hmm. So for a couple reasons, I chose doing that.
Okay, that sounds good. So what is it like to have been a student and then come back as a speaker?
I have the opportunity to provide a lot of retrospect feedback, a lot of, in my case, encouragement to the concept of integrating in as much practical application as you can into your career, into your academic career. And the really good feeling that I get out of it is that I'm able to say to students what people didn't say to me. Because I'm not a student. I've been out of school for longer than I was in school, mm-hmm. and but I'm still young at heart, and I still really get it. I haven't been in an industrial workforce, so I'm somewhere bridged in between. I really understand what was going through their minds and what they don't really know about the outside world, and I'm able to kind of communicate that difference in terms that they would understand.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so how did IPPD shape your career specifically?
Well,
influence it, yeah.
I would be lying if I said that IPPD changed everything about the entire world that I lived in and everything. It's not that case, but mm-hmm. the reality is that the sum of a lot of little things really do make a big difference in your life. And it was definitely one of the things that made me understand how different application is from school and how you're supposed to bridge what you learn in a classroom to what you do with a team, an industrial project, and in my particular case, because my project was actually pretty unique, or at least different than most other projects, how to be nimble and how to kind of find the guiding light and not do what's on paper, but do what needs to be done for the company.
Could you tell me a little bit more about that project?
Yeah. So the project, when you begin in IPPD, you have this specification of this is what the project's going to be. And very quickly into the project, we actually discovered that rather than the whole redesign that they wanted done was really a fix to a problem that they had misdiagnosed. And so we found the real issue, and it turned out to be just the manufacturer that was making the part was doing a bad job. And it was very, very hidden. There was many layers that we had to dig up, and we had to kind of we had to do some science and some engineering to figure that out and prove it, and actually even quantify it. Or prevent it, but the reality is that the basis from the beginning was malformed. And that's not any knock against anyone, that's reality. That's, a lot about how projects work. You have to, you don't know what it's going to be. As I like to quote Einstein, if we knew what we were doing, it wouldn't be called research. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to be nimble and redefine the goal as you figure out things down the line.
Okay.
So that was the project. We had to do that, and I can tell you more detail if you want, but it's more techie.
Sure. My next question was going to be about a valuable lesson you learned, or like your favorite memory. So maybe that relates.
Well, the most valuable lesson that I learned from the project was, honestly, it was the first time where I really had a team dynamic.
Okay.
It was specifically, I think it was 5 individuals. All of them were young. All of them, like myself, and all of them were kind of that green thumb, or not green thumb, the green engineer, as I call them. They've got a lot of the the aspiring hope. They've got a lot of the energy, but they have very little yield and understanding of themselves. And so it's kind of that thrown into a pile, and you have a coach that's trying to lead, not direct, but kind of like you're in them. And so I really learned the team dynamics of that, and I knew it was important to not overlead because I'm kind of a natural take charge kind of guy, and I knew that it was important to leave room for other people kind of taking charge in certain things, and to not overdrive and to not underdrive. So that was kind of one of my first real beyond little special scenarios where I had the chance to experience that. And it was, things in my future added on to that, but it was kind of one of the beginning times where I appreciated teamwork. And in engineering, there is no standalone engineer. So it's pretty critical.
Okay. Yeah. Well, could you tell me a little bit more about your project then too?
Right. So the project was actually working on fire trucks, which starts out pretty fun. We got to go see the place where they manufactured the parts and the trucks themselves. And the project was, there was a particular display panel, like an electrical panel, that displayed critical elements of the pumps that actually pump the water, pretty critical stuff. And, in simple terms, the screen was flickering. And we were trying to figure out a redesign that made that not happen. They had their own presumptions about what the problem was, and as I told you before, we actually we did some root cause analysis that said it wasn't that, it was this. And what was cool is that, in order to do that, we had to use microscopes, SEM, which is the fancy electron microscope, and we had to get into the chemistry and the science and art of soldering. And I learned a lot on that. And we found out we got to deal with real material science, and it was really neat. You can't just poke at it and say, well, it seems like it's bad. You have to say, why is it bad? How do we keep it from being bad? And what specifically made these fail that didn't make those fail if they were all produced the same way? And we had to answer those questions, and the answer to those was pretty much the project itself. And then we had a little bit extra time because typically these projects are made long enough that you can do a lot of work. They're 2 semesters. And so we had extra time, and we actually used that to investigate more into the situation to quantify things. Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, it's probably bad soldering, solder better. But it's a different thing to say, why did these break and why did these not break if they were the same process? And so we kind of took the opportunity to make it a little bit more investigative and a little bit more research and a little bit more understanding why things were the way that they were. And I remember distinctly one of the techniques that we used was called, actually I forget exactly the term, but it was Moiré interferometry. There we go. 2 words that are very hard to say. But basically, it's a neat effect where when you have very, very tiny lines that kind of grid up like this, you can see them going in and out of each other. And what they would do is, in order to be able to tell how a material deforms, they would take the material at an initial state and cast it, like as a plastic, on a mold that had lots of fine little lines. And then they would heat it up, or they would subject it to some mechanical distortion, or let it kind of do its thing that we didn't know why it was distorting. They would do that, and then they would take that piece that had that plastic kind of slots pattern embedded onto it, and they would look at it through a lens that had lines. And almost if you think about it, when you look through these blinds or you look through the screen, you can kind of see, if you look to another screen, you would see that effect, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's effectively what they were doing. It was one of the professors on campus that was pioneering this technology, and the result was you look at this block of metal or something like that, and it's got this pattern all over it, and your eyes can't see micro changes in its shape. But you put this grating, as it's called, in front of it, and suddenly the whole thing comes alive literally in color and in shapes and patterns that tell you where the stresses were. It's an optic effect, but it's very neat. We may have already figured out what the problem was, but in the process of us learning new techniques and us having to learn and understand the science behind that technique, just for the fact alone that it blew everyone's mind was enough of a inspiration and an experience for everyone in the group to say, this is really cool. We really enjoyed this. And that was one of a couple of different things that we did. That was probably the coolest. But Yeah, it's stuff like that made the project cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'll say again that our project was a lot more unconventional, probably because of my background, because they would tend to pair the non-mechanical, non-electrical people on the more abstract projects, where the electrical and mechanical people would be more robots, automate this, make a machine for this kind of stuff. So everyone else got the more or less, Harris projects, the Lockheed Martin projects, or the industry projects. We got kind of a peculiar project.
So what would you say are some top attributes that made you as a student or other students with you successful?
As a result?
Yeah.
I would say, again, I don't want to paint it as like this one thing made everything else possible. It was one of many, and should be more, things that helped bridge the gap between my education and my career. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is, besides the teamwork thing that I mentioned, the hands-on, you are responsible for actually figuring out this thing. You've got a team with delegated responsibilities, and we all have to work together. All these little things add up. One of the other things was that there was interaction, actually, with industry. We would go to them. We would have meetings with them. We'd have deliverables to them. We would have to communicate with them on their technology. And it's a step-up concept for connecting fresh, green students with the world that they're going to enter in before they're actually there. And all of that stuff is really valuable. If not, if I would say any suggestion, it's to do more of that, and to do it earlier, and to do it more integrated with school, which I hear a lot of people talk about. It's a matter of practicality and mm-hmm. how long you're actually willing to stay in school.
So in a similar vein, what would make an IPPD coach successful, or what's the most helpful part about having a faculty member to guide you through that process?
Great question. And I actually, I wasn't the coach. I was a student,
right,
to be clear.
Right.
But I am, in my current career, in very much a coaching position. And I can tell you, looking back then and the circumstance that I was, and looking right now and the other shoes that you're asking about, that the most important thing is your ability to balance helping the team without doing it for the team. That's what a coach does. But to actually get to the point, you don't want to be keeping them from making mistakes. You want them to help make good mistakes that have lower consequences, to not catch them before they make mistakes, but help them catch them mistakes themselves. But it's to not shortcut the experience, and the experience is the productivity, and it's the mistakes, and it's the finding out that you waited way too long, or you went too far down the wrong road without getting it. Those experiences, whether it's a regret experience or whether it's a really pleasing experience, those personal experiences are foundational. And that's really the takeaway of any sort of experience. So a good coach recognizes when to do that and when not to. And that applies on all levels. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what is your current career like? How does it relate to IPPD? Or maybe you could just tell me what you do now.
So I have a manufacturing e-commerce startup called Fracture, which you may know.
Yeah. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
We're right across the street.
Yeah, very successful. Yeah, I know a lot of
sure.
people who really love you guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You could use a lot of fractures in this room, actually.
That's true.
It's true.
Yeah.
So it's for those who don't know what Fracture is, it's our mission is to bridge the gap between people's digital photos, whether it's your point-and-shoot camera, your mobile phone, or Facebook, or some place where digital files exist, and your walls, or your desk, or basically your real world, mm-hmm. in a affordable, easy, and contemporary way. That's it. It's very simple. And our first product, as we like to say, is the glass print, which is a frameless, borderless, all-color, vibrant, really cool, simple product that's just, we call it the HDTV of prints. It just looks like glass, just glass printed. And everyone gets it when they see it. They really like it. So my job has been, as a founder, I was a technology founder of it. That's one small part of a much bigger picture. There's a lot of team involved. There's a lot of wearing 1,000 different hats at about 10 times a day, changing them all over. But at this point in the career, a lot of what I do is bridging gaps between people, managing people, and a lot of hands-on version of managing. I don't sit at a desk and say, you do that and you do that. It's really pretty hardcore engineering management, where we're all as a group, like I was partially late to this because I was in a very intense R&D meeting about trying to figure out of the 100 things that we need to do, we can only do 50 of them, and they're not going to fit into the time period that we have. So how do we put them in the right order? How do we do them? Is it the pros and cons of this, the pros and cons of that? There's no real answer. But when you put a bunch of minds together in a room and they're all kind of going after the same goal, part of my job is keeping them on the same goal. It's a combination of management, of team organization and leadership, and real engineering. We have automated and built the entire process on our own foundation. So everything's customized and not always by our choice. There's just nothing out there that does what we do. So that's pretty much my day-to-day job. It's a lot of chaos, a lot of filling in gaps with technology, with just solutions of any sort. And that's where I really, that's why I say I've taken a lot of steps towards teamwork, and I'm sure every engineer will. But IPPD was one of the very first, long-term and bigger experiences before I got into the real world.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really challenging job, but
you have no idea.
I have a teeny tiny bit.
Yeah, I'd invite you to take a tour.
Okay, that would be really fun. Before we end, though, what is one comment you'd like to say to the IPPD community who would watch this interview, or to future engineers?
Don't hesitate. Do everything you can to get experience. Mm-hmm. Do everything you can to make the experiences that you get real and serious. I see when I actually do talk, I do presentations to students several times a year on not exactly this topic, but on entrepreneurship. And one of the things that I really tout is you as a student aren't fully awake. And you don't really realize what's at stake and what opportunities are being thrown at you. So one of the things that I really tout is really taking things seriously, waking up, and using the stuff that's been given to you. That was serendipitously one of the things that I just happened to have fallen into at UF. Is I got into research, I got into these projects, and it accidentally woke me up very early. I had a hard time actually focusing on the academic part because I was so busy with the other part, with the research and with the projects that I had going on. But there's so many resources, and IPPD is absolutely one of them. And to have gotten to the point where you have that opportunity just coming to the school, let alone having IPPD, after that, if you're not taking full advantage of it, you're really squandering quite an inheritance. And then you can go to a layer deeper to when you're in the actual the groups themselves. There's a lot of personal learning that you can get out of those. And I would say at that level, I'm in the group and I've got these people around me, the number one thing that I think the student can focus on to take away the most is what is the difference between who I am right now and where this course is trying to point me towards. It's do I realize the things that I don't know? It's do I realize what elements of an engineer really make the engineer that I have or have not learned yet? It's kind of understanding and having an appreciation for what you have to learn out of this experience. If you don't have a measurement on that, if you don't have an idea about what you're going in without, that you want to leave with, if you don't have an idea on that, you don't really know. There's a classic expression: what doesn't get measured doesn't get improved. And so kind of the principle of going into it knowing I'm young, I'm green, these things exist so that I can learn. What am I going to learn? And throughout the period, because it's a 2-semester project, throughout the period, am I learning those things? And it's a very simple principle, but it's very foreign to students because they're overwhelmed. It's just all happening so quickly. But I don't take that as an excuse. And I've met a lot of people, a lot of students that just simply need that explained, that they never really had it explained point blank like that. And it makes a huge difference. So that's the one thing I would say. Just take it seriously, look for what you're going to look for what you're going to get out of the thing, and reevaluate on a routine basis whether you're getting it or not.
Okay. So if you could describe IPPD in one word, what would it be? Application.
But I could also use many other words.
Okay. To explain why you think application would be a good choice?
Because it's one thing to have learned a principle, it's a different thing to apply it. So that's what it's about. And like I said, it's one of many steps that is a career of learning how to apply your skills.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time. Is there anything else you'd like to add to anyone else watching?
Go out there and do good things with the world.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.